Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Mosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and Television. Today we have a special treat, a request from someone who hopefully listens to our podcast. I'm just going to call him Nick P.
Ostensibly,
sent us an email saying that, hey, here's this movie that most people have never heard of from the 80s, and it's great, and you should check it out. So we said, we never hear from people. We'll do it.
We'll do literally anything you tell us to do.
Yeah. So today we're doing
figuratively
The Beast, and then some people call it The Beast of War. It's a movie from 1988, directed by Kevin Reynolds. And
for those of you who don't know, of Waterworld and Prince of Thieves fame.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
So you know you're in for a treat.
But this is just like one of his first films.
Yeah. And let's just get into it. So, Scott, you got a funny logline for us?
Well, you didn't introduce us, but sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's wait until I introduce people to get into it. Scott Thurlow is joining us today.
Cheers. Keep on tanking.
Along with Jonathan Manzur.
Going full Ahab yet again.
You only can ever go for him.
Christopher Morgan.
War never changes.
And myself, your host, Steve Hermosi. So now let's get into it. Scott, give us a funny logline.
Yeah, so I came up with a bunch of them, but the one I'm going to go with is in Soviet Russia, tank drives you.
Absolutely. All right, great. Let's talk about the plot. Ian.
So it's this Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. A group of tanks go and destroy a Afghani village, ostensibly to root out the Mujahideen. And one of the tanks gets lost on the way back. And it's a tale. Basically, you're following both the Afghani rebels attempting to destroy the tank and their story, which is a surprisingly nice and unbiased look at.
Yeah, they're not one-sided, like one-dimensional bad guy villains. Yeah, exactly.
And then it's also following the Soviet soldiers as they attempted. And here's the thing: I assumed going in that once they established the Afghani rebels as sympathetic of the protagonists, I'm like, oh, they're just going to go full Cold War style. Soviets are evil, and they didn't actually. It's more of musing on the nature of war, the nature of revenge. If you will, it's almost an intellectual thing of, if we just sat down and talked, we'd resolve all of these problems. And that's basically one of the soldiers, who is the protagonist, is more of a soft-spoken intellectual. He ends up getting accused of betraying and left behind, and joins up with the rebels to take out the tank while their commander goes full Ahab. I thought it was a very enjoyable piece. I think that the script was better than the movie that was produced. And I think it was more intelligent than expected. I just don't know. There's something...
I feel you.
For being a great film.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
A good film. So I'm going to give it a good 2. It's good. And the script... But under a better direction with maybe better actors, this would have been a brilliant film. This would have been a Hunter Red October type.
Should have gone with that one.
Such, but there's just something about it that leaves it behind.
Sorry, Chris, if you just let me go real quick, I just want to sort of piggyback on that. Yes, I agree. I'm going to give it a pretty strong 2, not quite enough for a 3. Yeah, I like the way you phrase it. On paper, it's like a little bit better than in execution, but we'll get into it in a sec. But yeah, it's sort of surprisingly nuanced and more broad, if you will, than you might expect from a 1988 era Cold War movie. So yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I was to your point. The film starts off pretty dark, and as Beth and I both observed, throughout the film, we kept forgetting. We had to keep reminding ourselves this is Soviets. It could have been Americans. It could have been British. It could have been but usually it would be either the Russians or the Americans. Right. But the problem I had, and don't get me wrong, I agree with you. It's getting a 2. I quite enjoyed the film. The problem I had is by the time we got to the end, it became more of a conventional piece. It became more of what it did is it started off like what would be like kind of like one of the darker Vietnam films that show the brutality of war. And as it moved on, it kind of became a chase. It kind of became a personal. It was just a slight shift in tone, but just enough of a shift in tone. I mean, as we were watching this, I kept feeling like I was getting farther away from where I began. I still think it's definitely worthy of a 2. It is a good film. But I just feel like just ever so slowly, once they tied Constantine, Jason Patrick, to the Rock, from then on, it started to slowly move away from, because there was no translator, so we could not, so we had to go by the subtitles that the protagonist didn't know, but there wasn't the cultural exchange. We didn't, they gave it a lot of grays, which in its credit was hard to do considering, but there was some nuance that was lost the second half of the film.
I feel you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if for my viewing, I don't know if I agree that I thought it lost something in the second half. Actually, really, I'm not saying that it wasn't 2 different ways of, methods of storytelling, because it for sure was a different movie at the end than it was at the beginning. And yeah, it is that break of when he gets crucified on the rock, basically, with the grenade under his head.
Booby trap.
And the wild dogs.
That things kind of change. And, I was just like thinking about this movie, and there's so many parallels to like other films that came before it. That part specifically, like him going and joining up with, not necessarily in this movie, the enemy, but like we just watched Lawrence of Arabia, and like,
exactly, Steve-O, yeah.
The idea of like, they say it in Lawrence of Arabia, like going native or whatever. And like identifying more with the Mujahideen than his own tank crew is really interesting. And I did like the end where they're like, hey, come on, like you have a place with us. And he's like, no, man, I'm going back to Russia. Was interesting. And also like reminiscent of Lawrence of Arabia. And as you guys mentioned, there's the Moby Dick aspect of it with the commander whose name was Daskell is just Ahab, straight up Ahab chasing his white whale. And like, there's so much interesting stuff here. And I guess like maybe that sticks to style, but like a lot of that is the plot, like pushing forward the ideas of what they want, that, the screenplay wants to say. I think you're right. It's probably a 2. I'm probably going to give it like the strongest 2. I almost gave this a 3.
Strong, solid 2 for sure.
But I think I will stick with a 2 on it.
I have to give it credit for something though. That the tank crew basically escapes, and would have escaped if the commander wasn't going full Ahab. I know I'm saying that a lot, but I want to stress how much the parallel was there of him being obsessed with getting this tank, because it's his identity. Ever since he was a kid, this was his identity. And it's not, oftentimes you'll hear, we can't leave a man behind. He doesn't give a shit about his men. He can't leave a tank behind because this is who he is. The reason that his obsession is what leads to them. So oftentimes you watch these kind of movies and like, oh, why did they? No, they explicitly say they would have gotten out, but he needs to turn around and save the tank. So I have to give credit for lampshading it. I think
it does go on, and not even on its way. Like it does take a moment and a point to explicitly point that out. Yeah, for sure.
But what you said, Steve-O, was another thing I meant to bring up is I do like the fact that he's like, no, I'm going back to Russia. Like, in other words, this really was a revenge tale for him. It was like he's a patriot, but there was
in his own way. Sure.
There was this cancer in his unit that was destroying his men, killed an interpreter. Their interpreter was just out of control. It's like they had to kill Kurtz, but then he's like, I got to go back to Russia. It's not quite it's more of a Moby Dick thing, but that was the.
It absolutely has those.
But it would have been so much easier for him to be like, this isn't a good war. I'm going to fight, I'm going to join the rebels. And it's not. So I give him credit for that, and it is getting a strong 2 for me. It's just not a 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like how we have to spend a lot of time discussing why this isn't a 3.
Yeah.
Kind of. Because I think there's an intangible aspect to it of like it doesn't reach.
It just feels a la the tank itself in the plot like sort of falling apart. It just doesn't quite get there, but it makes it a long way.
It's so close, and there's just elements that don't quite gel narratively, but it's razor thin. It really is razor thin.
Agreed.
Yep. Agreed. All right. Let's move on to the themes then. Scott, kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, you guys touch upon it. Like, certainly there are more than a bit of direct and overtones of Moby Dick and the Captain Ahab like type character for sure. Captain whatever, George whatever. I don't remember all the characters' names because they're all in Russian. Like, sorry.
Played by George Dzundza, who was in
he's
Deer
quite,
Hunter and a bunch of other stuff.
He was in a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, it's that, and like, yeah, maybe just because of the recency effect that yes, we just happened to watch and review with Lawrence, but I think certainly there are a bit parallels there, like some superficial and some more like substantial. Right? They're in the desert and like they're fighting the rebels, and then one guy goes to join them because he gets disillusioned with his own army, and also his commander is going off the rails, like pretty much. And one of you mentioned Red October, like also kind of a good connection there. Like, the tank is falling apart. Oh, it's leaking gas. Oh, the parts are breaking down, right? It's them trying to keep it together the whole time while the commander adamantly says, we're leaving in this tank or never leaving at all, right? So, like, I think it's all that. Yeah, the horrors of war, when you mentioned, right? Of course, it opens up with them, like, with the commander basically commanding Jason Patrick to run over one of the rebels in the tank as an example, pretty much. And that sort of kicks off like the rebels' revenge, like whatever their term for revenge is. Like they said it even in the film, right? It's like one of the concepts they have that they invoke. So yeah, I think it handles all that stuff pretty well. And again, I guess to me, the impressive part is that because this is ostensibly an 80s war action movie, like coming out of the era, like it handles this stuff like in a different way than you probably expect and normally are accustomed to seeing in such a movie, like given the framework of it and the genre, right? So I'm giving it a pretty damn solid 1. I think it did a good job. The characters were well portrayed and made sense. And and Chris, I think you mentioned the closing off, like the ending part of Jason Patrick going back. Like, yep, it was a nice time here with you, and like I got rid of I'm free of now the sort of corrupting or like the worst aspects of my commanding officers and my fellow soldiers, but I'm going home. Like I'm not staying in the desert to fight anymore. So yeah, I think it all works, and I'm going to give it a 1.
I want to talk about a couple interesting things. I appreciate what you said there, Scott. This is actually a discussion of leadership, both from Taj and Constantine, both young men within their unit who are forced into power and how they deal with that. And it's almost like a musing on what war should be versus what war is. And you mentioned the horrors of war, but like the idea is like, do we put revenge before civility? And do I pull Chris here and like the logic of Spock? Should we be logical and civilized over giving into our emotions and things like that? But overall, I actually thought it was because on one hand you have Taj, or who's becoming Khan. He is he has that character Mustafa, who kind of plays the dark version of it, who's let's use the war to enrich ourselves. And then you have Constantine, who is paralleled against the commander. Who's I just think it's interesting. And then one of the aspects of the horror war, which is we become what we hate. The commander started his life taking out Nazi tanks, and then he became, in a sense, the Nazi commander. They actually explicitly say that at the end. Yep. I actually think I was hoping they would. I thought that was a nice little
touch
drop there. But yeah, we become what we hate. And you can take this 32 years later and put Americans in there, and we became what we hated as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, you could have probably put Americans in there in 1988. It would have been the same thing, but maybe not in the same place at that time.
It'd be pretty similar, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with with basically everything you guys have been talking about. I think it's really interesting. There's a lot going on in this movie. And as you mentioned, Ian, I think that's the most interesting part is like the kind of foils, how both groups are foils for each other, and they both have this like power struggle that's going on either side. And it's interesting to see, when that gets unbalanced, because they try to kill Constantine, and then he goes over to the other side. So that's like what, 3/4 of the way through the movie, maybe.
Yeah, about roughly. Yeah.
And the rest of it is like really interesting to see the two like optimistic characters as opposed to like the more, like you mentioned, like the darker, like more evil, I guess, if you want to use that word in this, which I don't love to, but I couldn't think of anything else. But like, the two more optimistic characters and forward-looking characters end up working together, much to the dismay of the other two, kind of their own foils on the other side. Yeah. So that's a really interesting aspect of it. And, just kind of the way that war affects every person differently in this, I thought was really done well. And, it says a lot about the human condition and when put really to stressful situations. And I thought that this movie brought that out really well. So
there's so much to unpack here. You all brought points I'd like to elaborate on. Because it is about leadership. There's a lot of parallels. There's also, to points you're making, the women who, in any culture, especially at the United States at that time as well, were not allowed, to be infantry. That they had to get their own agency. So you had the one guy at the sunglasses, who was basically, we got what we want. And all of a sudden he was kind of like, whatever. But as soon as the women crossed him, he got bent out of shape about it. I agree with you guys. It was a very interesting take about the effects of war, about leadership, about the individual, and about like I said, the differences between men and women. Because like during this whole time, I'm watching, there's all sorts of different conflicts playing out, all sorts of different dynamics playing out. So I was just kind of drawing everything you guys had said together, because one thing overrode everything else that I was thinking about is that you could not make this movie, and especially for the beginning, and have the Americans be the Soviets. You cannot tell this story now. Beth and I had been having this discussion, since the movie ended. We got done watching it a little while ago. And the thing is, we're running through all the things. Like Hurt Locker is basically the is the one that has the most about the emotional, psychological toll on the human, the soldier, how we don't take care of our infantry people, the ones that everybody says you can't disrespect, that we all love. They once they're done, they're done. They're tossed over. And this film does deal with a lot of those aspects of it in the power dynamics. But I found it was really interesting, the fact that in order to see what horrors we will do as humans, in order to, for lack of a better word, fight a greater evil, because Beth and I meant to look up before we started this, why the Russians invaded Afghanistan anyway, and the fact that we haven't left in 40 years.
He can probably tell you.
It's something you have, as an empire, you have to do. It's Afghanistan is known as the graveyard of empires for a reason. From back the Macedonian Empire to like all throughout the British Empire, everyone, it's like, we're going to do what no other country empire,
sorry,
and then they lose. It's fantastic.
It's where empires go to die, I suppose.
But the thing that resounded to me the most, and this is the beginning of it, because you have the Mujahideen, and you have the Russians, the Soviets, and the Americans were out there somewhere, and farms got destroyed, regardless of who they were. In a sense, the casualty, just because you may be a rebel, just because you may have given a Soviet or an American, a glass of water, it's just like, if you were a farmer in the middle of this, you didn't ask for any of this bullshit, and to me, the beginning of this film resonated. I mean, there's so many good points you guys brought up, and I've talked a lot, but the beginning of this film resonated with me in a way I'm not going to be able to shake anytime soon.
I hear you.
So it's getting a very, 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 very strong one for me.
I got one final thing, or at least my thoughts on theme. Sorry, real quick, because you jogged my memory, Chris. There's another scene like after the tank starts like failing and like parts are breaking, and they're trapped like in the darkness of the desert. They can't see, but they have radar, so they think like in their mind they're being surrounded by the rebels. So they're like, fire all the weapons. They're fucking flame throwing things, and like then they go in the next morning and like the rebels are tracking them, and it turns out they just killed a bunch of deer, like a herd of deer that were surrounding the tank, like for which they thought. But I thought that was a very good moment that sort of exemplifies some of the things you were saying there. So yeah.
And the beauty of that moment is the moment that follows media afterwards, where the look at these butchers.
Exactly. They'll just kill whatever. They don't care. Yeah, exactly.
They're terrified in their little tank, fired blindly into the night. Actually, that's, I think, one of the best scenes. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I agree, Scott. Thank you for bringing that up.
And there's another one which we can pick a lot apart in this. The poisoning of the wells. They saw the village well. Then they poison a well, and then it kills their own men later on.
Yep. That's right. That's a good moment too. Yeah.
All these little touches throughout are fantastic. Yeah, I just wish that they had that little extra.
Well, that's why that's why we have to discuss plot in more of a narrative.
I feel you. Yeah, I'm with you though.
Which is why we can then heap more praise on to themes.
Yeah. But yeah, those two scenes, good call, Scott and Ian, for both of those. I mean, I guess the poisoning of the wells isn't exactly one scene, but it is this really interesting kind
of the Chekhov's poison
concern.
I didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the Chekhov thing is like, the gun was introduced. They introduced the poison. I forgot about it, and they brought it back in the best.
It was quite cleverly done for sure.
Yeah,
in that way. Yeah.
All right, so that's one's all around for themes. Chris, talk about antagonists.
Antagonist. Well, all right. Well, let's just say for taking the Ahab plot in there, it's the tank commander.
Daskal is his name.
What's his name?
Daskal.
Yeah, it's Daskal for the. I mean, yeah, it's Daskal for the most part, because he is, out of all of them, the most inhuman. And I'm sure, I mean, again, as I was telling Beth, I'm like, this was released in 88, shot in 87. So this was at the end of the Reagan administration. Everybody was, it was still like the whole Cold War thing, Yankee Doodle, yada, da, da. But
I love that song.
Sorry. But with regard to the narrative, would you say, Ian?
I'm going to use Yankee Doodle da 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 from now on.
But for the considering if we're going to look at our group of 4 tankers, Constantine and George, what's his name
Stephen
again?
Baldwin.
Konstantin,
no, but the tank
Golikov, and Kaminsky.
Yeah. So in that dynamic, with that dynamic, it's definitely the tank commander is the antagonist. There are nuances where we can shift antagonists, but if we are going to look at where the ending brought us, where Jason Patrick was really going after the tank, and I just was realizing, like, why didn't he shoot for the treads? He wouldn't have killed anybody. And I'm like, that's probably what he was trying to do.
I mean, did they
he
show
just
the
wanted
treads
to
were all
kill a
messed up?
CO. He didn't want to kill the other guys.
I think, sorry, Chris, I think this film specifically did address that, like that exact question. At least that's what I got out of it. That's all I'm saying.
What?
Well, he hit the muzzle. Anyway.
Yeah, but then they showed the treads were all messed up. Like, I'm just saying that specific thing. Like, they very clearly cut to the treads being messed up and at the end. So
I think that was just because the tank was falling apart for the whole freaking movie.
Yeah. Well, they had done a couple cutaways where you could see that the treads were starting to come undone. But yeah, I'm gonna say it's definitely the tank commander is the for the character narrative, for the main character narrative antagonist. It is our tank commander. I'm definitely giving him a 1 because he is truly a horrible person. In a world of horrible people, he is one of the horrible ones in a.
I agree, except I actually think they did a fairly decent job building his character. Yeah, he's a terrible guy.
Oh, without question. Without question.
Understanding exactly. I'm going to go one further though. Yeah, he's the villain, but the tank's actually the real antagonist to this.
Fucking A.
So the antagonist, the tank commander.
I knew I was gonna say that, but I
that tank is Goliath. It's all the representation of power and that kind of Goliath. I mean, I think there's Goliath tanks.
They literally referenced it as such for sure. Yeah.
But like that's the idea of power over a culture that doesn't. They use it as the Nazis and tanks. They use it as the Russians in Soviet. It's what everyone is terrified of. It's what's driving. It actually reminds me of The Lighthouse, almost with the light, and everyone kind of.
I like that.
This tank it represents, and it's collapsing as it moves along. It's a really beautiful metaphor of the fleeting nature of power and all of that. So I'm going to give it a very strong 1.
It's really fascinating that you say it like that. I think that they're both central antagonists, right? There's 2 ecosystems in this movie. One is inside the tank and one is outside the tank.
Yeah.
Inside the tank, he's the antagonist, right? What did I just say was his name? Dashiell is the antagonist. Outside of the tank is
the whale.
Is the not even, because it's the boat. That if the whales were a big part of what their deal was,
that's what I meant.
Was a big part of Moby Dick. If the whales trying to kill that ship were Moby Dick, that it would be them. So the tank is the antagonist outside of the tank, and I think he's the antagonist inside the tank. Mm-hmm. And then they become kind of one and the same at the end of the movie, when Constantine goes out and does his thing. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's really strongly done in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, it all ties together. Like, all good calls on all your part, because of I like the dichotomy there, right? So, and I'm sorry, yeah, I know I wanted to mention this earlier, but I was going to joke. You said getting involved in a land war in Asia is obviously the antagonist here, but and also the fact that Russian technology falls apart. But no, of course it works, the bubble within, bubble without, that quite a bit. And yeah, one of you said, Chris or E, that even though Commander is he might seem one-dimensional on surface, but they give him enough motivation to flesh out his character so you know where he's coming from. You know that this is his, again, mindset, and he's dead set, come hell or high water, this is what he's going to do no matter what, right? And that then affects, of course, his unit and his men, and then that the tank itself then affects, versus set against the Mujin, and when Jason Patrick joins them. So it all works, and I'm giving antagonist a pretty strong 1 as well.
I just have one last thing to say about this, and it goes back to the acting, though, which sometimes we don't talk about on this, but he has a couple of really good, monologues in there. But occasionally he chews scenery, not in a good way.
Sure. Yeah.
Especially when he's glaring at the the interpreter. Like the Kill Bill, like dude, like and his red eyes. It was almost over the top at times. So that's just one.
Figured on that, yeah. I get what you mean, sure. For those moments,
and I want to definitely reiterate what Ian said and Scott reiterated. That that he was, even though there was some cheese scene chewing and some cheese spread in the desert, they did flesh him out. He wasn't just a one-dimensional villain. And I also like the thing about the tank, because the tank became so many things. It was shelter. It definitely did have a life of its own. I mean, it was definitely bleeding out. It had some terminal things. So I really like the tank angle on that, Ian, because the tank served many, many purposes and was a symbol of many, many things.
Yeah.
I got one more, yes, Moby Dick, but I guess maybe even a bit of Old Man in the Sea, to a degree.
Oh, I can see that.
Yeah. So yeah, one for antagonist, I think.
All right. So that's going to be one's all around for antagonists, and we're going to talk about the protagonists, I believe, with me. So I think that Taj and Constantine share this distinction pretty clearly, in my mind anyway. I think that they almost, until they, combine efforts at the end, I think they almost split screen time 50-50. There's a lot of good character arc work and character work with both of these characters. I really do enjoy what the script does with both of them in terms of them kind of adapting to their situations, learning, both learning new things, especially when they get together. But even before that, you see both are willing to try different ways, try to work out issues within their distinct situations before they really move to any kind of violence. But once there is that need for violence, neither one of them really hesitates to, act on it. So I think that they both are pretty damn strong protagonists, and I'm going to give them a 1.
Yeah, I mean, agreed, Steve, that they both are, but in my mind, it might be a little bit more weighted towards 40, whatever, but it's a hair split, really. It's certainly their stories, and like you said, both separately, and then when they join together, and actually if we pick out a couple of scenes, I like the scene quite a bit when they take them to their mountain camp or in the caves or whatever, and they're having communication issues, but Constantine knows just in a few words. In fact, the three concepts that he was taught the word for by the interpreter before the commander went on his rampage and killed him. That sort of saves him, convinces the Mujin to take him back. And then they're like, listen, this guy can help us. He knows how the Russian technology works. He knows how to fix the RPG, right? So that sort of builds their trust, even though it's it's not maybe the greatest thing to build a friendship around, but it's something there they can connect with, and they have the same goal generally then after that point. So goody.
I love the universality of kaput.
Yeah,
of what?
Kaboom.
Kaput. Everyone knows what kaput is. Right? Doesn't matter if you're a tribesman in Afghanistan. Everyone knows it.
Yeah, take the rocket, boom, kaboom, kaput, right? So yeah, I'm just saying, it works. I think it's their story for sure, and I think you're right. It's quite well balanced between them, and the performances are damn solid as well. I'll give it a solid 1.
And they both have well-earned arcs.
Yes.
See the challenges of leadership, and Constantine realizes that surrender is honorable, and he ends up saving his troops, not his former commander, but everyone else in the squad.
Yeah, at least it's former squad mates who are not as deranged, and where in fact they finally realize how off the rails the commander had gone by.
Although to be fair though, if they didn't get together and shoot the RPG thing, that tank would have broken down on its own.
Yeah, it was screwed either way for sure. But.
There's
I just love how the women at the end just drop a pile of fucking rocks on the thing. They're like, oh shit, we failed. All right, well let's grab a blow up a bunch of rocks and drop it on there. That'll work.
Yeah, I liked it. It was the rocks from God. Like rocks fall and everyone dies is what I wrote down in my notes. But
Yeah.
Which again speaks to the agency of the women.
Mhm.
And I also like how the fact that they kept saying like, oh no, you can't do this, they can't do this. They're like, fuck you. They beat the guy to death with rocks and like brought his bloody clothes back. This is my kaboom stick. Anyway, I agree. I agree with the fact that Constantine and Taj were both protagonists. The film is definitely gelled in a way when they were together. I keep thinking. I really liked at the beginning when he was speaking to one of the elders. I'm not sure if it was his grandfather, or if it was his.
I think it was his
where
uncle.
he said.
Yeah, I think you said uncle.
Uncle, where he's just like, he asked him a question. He goes, you are Khan if you ask that question. There was a lot of, yeah, I agree. They went on similar arcs. My thing is, I'm wondering, like, since when Constantine left, I mean, did they like turn their ire onto Taj? Where they're like, "Fuck you, dude," So that's kind of like what I was left. I'm
Another
like,
movie.
Did he kind of screw over Taj at the end? Like, but yeah,
I didn't even get that sense, Chris. Is all.
I'm just throwing some thoughts around there because I have really nothing else to add beside that. I'm giving them a 1.
Well, you said grandfather. Scott, you said
Uncle grandfather.
Uncle grandfather, yeah.
Nice. All right. It sounds like it's ones all around for protagonists. Let's talk about the supporting characters. Ian.
I love the supporting characters in this, particularly 2 I'm going to talk about, and then I'll actually. You mentioned the women quite a bit. In fact, if the movie taught me anything, Afghanistan should just give its entire forces.
Let the women run the rebels.
Like the Peshmerga, or is it's called the Kurdish female forces. I
don't remember the name offhand, but I know what you mean.
Nonetheless, yeah, it's a. But nonetheless, Mustafa was a great kind of slimy. He's almost a cliche in kind of the action films.
Almost, but yeah.
Without screwing over the protagonists, but it's just like he's out there for his own. I really enjoyed his character. He had a lot of great swagger.
He's fucking Lando Calrissian out there, like.
Yeah, exactly. But my favorite character was Samad, done by Eric Avari. As the interpreter, he was the best actor in this film.
He's been in tons of shit, man. Look at him.
He's awesome, man.
He gave a heck of a performance to a character who died about halfway through the film.
He didn't get much time. He got like okay time, but
he did everything to build up that character and also represent an entire side of why certain Afghanis would work with invader forces, the hope for the future, and then the prejudices of the military commanders. Stopping him, killing him. It's such a beautiful, and I think one of the great long-term insights you can see into how Afghanistan actually historically developed, and why groups in Afghanistan would be like, all right, we'll take over, but we don't trust your intentions, whether you're Soviets or Americans, because every time we try, we get shot in the back. I think that's he added a lot of gravitas to this, so I'll pass it along.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. He was definitely like the best. Like again, he's been in so many things. Like I recognize him instantly. Like, damn, I can't believe he's in this movie because I recognize him so many thousands of other like more high profile stuff. But something you said, like Mustafa, like yeah, like some characters, even Stephen Baldwin and the other Dejan Patrick's other tank mates that not the commander, right? On the surface, they're like kind of like the same dudes you've seen in every fucking war movie kind of like this. But at the same time, I do think they were given enough room to fill out their characters and create the dynamic in the relationship between them that worked. Like the chemistry was there, the rapport was there, and when that gets strained, etc. So I think they all rounded out quite a bit, like the rest of the cast, beyond the ones you said. So for that, I will give them all collectively a 1, with Eric being the best. Yes.
I think it's Peshmerga. I think that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. I agree. I think that there are a lot of great characters here that get elevated by their, you know, they have more dimensions than you're used to seeing in a lot of, especially war movie like extras. And I think that they all do a really good job. Obviously, yeah, Eric Avari is awesome, and he's been in a million things. It's weird to see him so young because I'm used to seeing him like white.
But he still kind of looks the same, like in the same.
But, yeah, oh yeah, for sure. But like,
well, he's always been a distinguished gentleman.
Yeah.
Like I'm used to like the white beard and like the bald head instead of this look. But
exactly.
like, yeah, he's great, and you know, even Stephen Baldwin does a really good job in this. Honestly, it's the other guy though, the guy that plays Kaminsky, or you know, the character Kaminsky, who has a lot of like kind of interesting heavy lifting as like almost the henchman to Daskell.
He's the one who buys into Daskell's like shit the most, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, and well, he's just a big dickhead and like completely like he's been like drinking brake fluid the entire time.
I forgot about that.
That was awesome. I had some raisins and let it ferment. This.
The first time you see him is he's acting like the cannon is an extension of his penis.
Yeah.
Exactly. So everything you need to know about the character.
You know exactly who he is right away.
Yeah, I know who this guy is now. That's all it needs to be done here.
And it's like, you know what? That scene is like, yeah, this guy's an asshole, but what a fucking shot that was. Holy shit. Like, Jesus Christ. It was just a good, like, cinematography fucking shot. But, yeah, I mean, I don't have much more to say. All these supporting characters are great. The group of women led by I forget what her name is, but the one that's like, you know, going through the ringer at the beginning of this movie and kind of takes the lead on all this stuff she does a great job. And you know, everybody else in there that gets peppered in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man.
So that's gonna be a ones all around, I think, right? Chris, did you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you guys say. I'm just gonna say one thing about the Eric's character, the interpreter, Samad.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm sorry, it's like they're great characters. I could go on about the little nuances, but I think he also I mean, you said something about the interpreters being shot in the back. I just want to bring up one thing that, like, you know, the Americans do that fucking thing too. I mean, you know, we have interpreters over there whose families, some of them get over here, they don't. Some of them, none of them leave. I mean, I do not think that Samad's character. I'm building off what you said, Ian, because I do not believe that his character can be underrepresented, symbolized. Unfortunately, everything about him is more than relevant, and there's enough blame to go around. I'm giving them a 1, but yeah, we're not getting away with this without some Chris Morgan little jabbings.
Yeah. It's a tragically accurate portrayal of a character like that, too. So,
yeah. Well, it just crossed my mind. Beth and I were like getting fuming again for all these things.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So that's gonna be ones all around for supporting. Let's talk about dialogue, Scott.
All right. So I don't know if this is like the weakest part of the film. I'm probably going to end up giving it a 1. Like, more often than not, there were a few moments, like you guys said, like the scenery chewing, mostly from the commander, like here and there. But I think the moments, like I mentioned, the scene in the cave when they're talking to each other, when he's learning Constantine, he's like, they're playing chess, I believe, like when they're stuck out in the desert, and he's like teaching them about the cultural like intricacies and stuff, right? And then when he becomes friends with Taj, so like. I think for the most part, and even like when the soldiers like argue amongst themselves and they're razzing each other and this and that, like it all works. Like it's nothing you really like haven't seen before, or even at that point, but it's done so well that it doesn't seem like grating or out of place, I guess I want to say. So like I'll probably give it a fine 1, maybe again like the softest one of this film, but it still works, I think, for the most part. So good.
I actually really love them trying to figure out how to speak to each other. Because oftentimes, I was expecting, all right, bring out the one random extra who
speaks
or English. But no, they didn't. And it was them fumbling with language. And I actually really appreciated a Because they could have done it lazily and they didn't attempt to.
Yeah, good call.
Here's so and so went to summer camp in England for a summer.
Yeah, no, they already shot the guy that spoke English. Like that's fucking yeah. I completely agree. I think that the dialogue is, maybe not the strongest in the world, but I actually really liked a lot of these like small little human moments that get peppered into the dialogue. I think that it's really well done in terms of that. There's a lot of close quarters with people in close quarters in the tank, obviously, and then like they kind of have their own like feel for that in some of the conversations with the Mujahideen as they're like having their conversations. There's like kind of these tight camera angles that makes it feel smaller a little bit sometimes, I think. And so like I don't know, I just like, I guess that's style, but like I like these little moments that they have.
But it melds with the dialogue
that are like, all right, here are who these people are. Like it's the dialogue tells you who they are, which is what sets this movie apart from other war movies, where the people in it are the important thing. It's not the action. It's not like, the greater war that's going on. It's the people that are involved in it that are really at the forefront of this movie, and that's why it's good. And I think that has a lot to do with the dialogue.
Yep, right on.
You guys said it. It's fine. It's fine dialogue. It's natural, but what they did with it and how they used it, what Ian and Steve-O just said, one.
Cool. All right, Chris, keep talking. Style
of this is fascinating because in a lot of ways it is actually in some ways it was the way it was shot. I was kind of the clarity of it. I was kind of like, wow, this is 1988. It had a modern aesthetic to it. It had a very 80s action aesthetic to it.
Sure, you're right. Yeah.
However, like the rest of this film, it walked that line very, very finely. As I said at the end, the film always, cinematography wise, the film seemed to really kind of cut the suit to fit. From
yes, I like that description, Chris. Yeah.
Because as you said, Steve-O, I mean, there were these very intimate, personal moments. I mean, the way they would, the different dynamics they'd show, Taj to his uncle, the way the women were spoken. I mean, it's just like the way Constantine and Sabad, the way that was shot. I found it really interesting to watch how each scene was handled. I really wish I didn't know the films the guy directed after this. But I mean, yeah, but that aside, well, I mean this is also could speak to the cinematographer. But I very much enjoyed the way this film was shot. I thought it was very interesting. I don't think they stuck with the style and just used that as a template, and they kind of, as I said, cut the suit to fit. One last thing I'm going to say is the music. I thought was it really hit me at the end. It kind of seems, out of like Apocalypse Now or something where you get that kind of dissonant atmospheric stuff. But I quite enjoyed it because I didn't notice the music until you had to notice it. Again, it was not overused. Could have been used bombastically. It wasn't. I'm happy giving this thing a 1.
Cody, I think you were going to go.
I think it's okay as well, but I'm on the other side of okay. Because there's so much. Perhaps I'm punishing this because we just saw Lawrence of Arabia. I think that one of the reasons if I was going to tell someone about this film, the style of this would be, well, probably not even enter the conversation. I'd be talking about all the other cool things that were peppered throughout this. And I think this is actually one of the hindrances of this being remembered as well as it, because I feel it felt more towards on the generic side. And there's actually one scene that reminded me exactly of a shot in Prince of Thieves, where they're like have the kind of faces lined up, and then there's a close up on one, kind of a focus on the front. But no, it says I think it was okay. And because the rest of this movie was so good, okay doesn't cut it. And that's actually one of the things holding it back. So I'm going to give it a 0 for it.
Interesting argument. Like, I was coming into it with the 1, and I think I probably still did, and they will. Like, and maybe it's I kind of got the sense what you said, Steve-O. I like the fact that because of the nature, right? So cut to the interior of the tank, and it's all claustrophobic, of course, right? So I thought that was very effective when they were doing that, and then cut to like the huge a la Lawrence, right? Like huge opening shots, sweeping shots of the desert, especially at night too, as well. So like, yeah, like it's not fucking amazing or anything, and like it can veer into like just sort of cliche, generic like war shots in a sense, but I still think overall for me, it didn't do that too much or to such a degree that I'm going to take away credit, even though I see you like you said, the other end of the okay on this one. Like, I think I might end up giving it an okay 1, but certainly like not the standout. Like you said, I wouldn't like lead off with the style is so amazing describing this film, but I do think it works for what it is within its genre for me. So
it's funny because Beth and I have been like, Day for Night always stands out. And the thing, Beth, we were watching the scene where they're playing chess, and Beth, and the shooting happens, and you can't really see much. And Beth's like, I thought it was really effective shooting this Night for Night, and I was just like, it would have been so, but it was so easy to do Day for Night or to have artificial lights in there. So I'm sorry, Steve. I'll go on.
I mean, I was just gonna say, I think I'm gonna give it a 1, just for the reason, like I read one review of this before we came on here, and it was like, yeah, I can't believe that this movie even got made, and a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that they, in an action movie, in a like war action movie in 1988, it made like half the movie subtitled, and like
fair enough, man.
They actually, in 80s Hollywood, they actually had, non-white actors playing, well, I guess the 80s was, but like non-white actors playing non-white parts and stuff like that, which you couldn't really say for Lawrence of Arabia 20 years earlier or whatever. But I like that they, and everything that you guys mentioned about that. I think the cinematography was pretty good for me. I mean, it wasn't like anything crazy mind-blowing, but I think that he took notes from movies that had better shots and things like that, and did them fairly well. Like, clearly Lawrence of Arabia, as we've mentioned several times, was like one of the big, like one of the big things that where the cinematography of this came from, those wide open shots, as you said earlier, Scott. So like, yeah, I mean, I'm going to give it a 1. It's not the strongest part of this movie, but it's enough for a 1 for me. But I completely get where you're coming from, E. And yeah.
Oh, shit, I just thought of something. You just by talking. What year was Last Crusade made? Because now we have to, I think, throw that into the
oh yeah,
the mix for a bit. But anyways, it just made me think of it as you're talking, Steve. That's all.
Wait, was this based on a play? Is that what it said at the beginning?
That's what Steve-O's research uncovered, it seemed, yeah.
Because
it was based on a play. What's that?
Oh, because I was sitting there going, how is this a play? And all of a sudden, the thing in Rushmore, if you guys saw Jason Schwartzman's play, I'm like, was it kind of like that?
That'd be awesome. But no, like Indiana Jones and the Last Tank Crusade or something should have been a
Last Crusade was 89, but clearly Raiders was,
All right. So you're saying Last Crusade ripped this movie off. I see what's going on.
I just want, since we were talking about it, the screenwriter and the guy who wrote the screenplay, did you go to Rutgers, Chris?
Yeah, I went to Rutgers.
All right, so we're all Rutgers students. He's from Rutgers as well. So.
Oh wow!
Give RU a shout out right there.
Yeah.
RU rah.
Boom. All right. So I think that's 3 1s and a 0 for style, and that brings us to recommend. That's going to be me. Yeah, I totally recommend this movie. Nick, thank you for recommending it to us. I definitely appreciated it, and you're right. More people should see this, so hopefully a couple people take our advice and go check it out. Yeah, it's a 1 for me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like I said, we were recommended it, which is something a little bit out of the ordinary by a sensible fan listener, at least. And yeah, Nikki P, if you don't mind me calling you that. Yeah, And now, having seen it, if I'd be like, you know what, there's a kind of a forgotten 80s war action movie featuring a lot bit more nuance and subtlety than you think, and you should check it out. So, yep, put me down for a 1.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was surprised by how nuanced it was. And it's not only on Amazon Prime, but it's on YouTube.
Yeah. It's easily found, too, yeah.
It's easily accessible. I would recommend, I think it's forgotten, but it doesn't deserve to be.
I agree.
Under the radar.
Especially in the 80s where you have all this machismo and, again, Yankee Doodle going on. This is a really well-balanced, well-nuanced film. And aside from a couple of things, I mean, I think thematically, as we discussed, you can take this and apply it. I think it is one of those things. Again, I'm the only one who hasn't mentioned Lawrence of Arabia, so I'm going to say, like Lawrence of Arabia, there's many things you could take out of this, and there is unfortunately, there is a timeless element to this film. Nick, thank you so much for recommending it. I very much recommend this movie. It was quite good.
F&A.
All right, I think that's going to do it. It's
what did that break down to?
3 9s and an 8. Ian's the one with the 8 because he gave a 0 to style, where the rest of it gave us
better
1s, and plot we all gave 2s to. So I think 8.75 is a pretty dang good score.
I think it's earned it.
And it's a good movie. Check it, thumbs up from us. So we've been talking about The Beast of War, or The Beast, whichever one you want to go with.
You decide.
I have been your host, Steve Ramosi, joined today by Scott Thurlow.
What? No liquor? Das Vidana, comrade.
Jonathan Yemenzer. And Chris Morgan.
Warner Quarrel goes to tank. Give it no tank to go to.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us. Catch you next time.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Ramosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.
Or Mott's?